Welcome to part 2 of my series on the biological basis of emotion and its role in our social interactions. Last time we talked about how or what the biological basis of perception of emotions are, perception of other people, and now we'll be talking about the areas of the brain involved in facilitating thought by using emotion. So the biological systems behind facilitating thought with emotions. And so we'll start with an area of the brain most people know deals with emotion, and that is amygdala. And this area is known for its fear recognition, or the fear learning, reward recognition, the ability to process relevant information. So when the amygdala is active, the brain knows that this is an important information to remember or to use in some sort of way down the road. Next we have the amygdala's ability to recognize biological emotion, most notably in the face. So the amygdala can help us recognize emotion in other people and their faces. And the amygdala is one of the first areas where information is gathered and is gone through the other parts of the brain. And so part of the reward center is the orbitofrontal cortex, and the amygdala connects to it through the uncinate fasciculus. Another noteworthy function of the amygdala is its ability to mediate emotion. So basically it's a regulation system of our emotions. If the amygdala goes through some kind of hyperactivity or something's wrong that causes it to be hyperactive, then we have what we call social anxiety disorder, or this sort of anxiety or continued stress that is unregulated, isn't taken care of. And it causes all sorts of problems, and it could cause us to have a harder time socializing with other people. And so, like I said last time, the uncinate fasciculus connects the limbic system and parts of the amygdala to the relevant parts of the brain for any situation. And of course, the reward center goes from the amygdala through the uncinate fasciculus into the orbitofrontal cortex, where the information is calculated, the reward and risk factors are calculated, and sent back to the other parts of the brain to determine the best course of action. So we see that the amygdala is important when it comes to facilitating thought through emotions. It can control the valence of an emotion, the importance of an emotion, and how it's relevant to our thought processes and our actions. And as you can see here, if there's any issues with any part of this reward system, that can cause anxiety, social anxiety, or the opposite, where you can't really feel a whole lot towards a particular stimulus at all. And another area involved in facilitating emotions is the anterior cingulate cortex. This area is also involved in the risk-reward calculation. This area of the brain learns behaviors that act on risk-reward assessment, calculates risk-reward and motivations of others. And this area is also where we have our panic or distress system. And so in this experiment, monkeys had their brains scanned for activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, concerning the anterior cingulate gyrus and the anterior cingulate sulcus. And the monkeys were made to basically play a game where they had a reward or some kind of prize, and then they would decide whether or not to share or withhold the reward, or to give it to no other monkey. And so when it came to the activation of the decision of rewarding others or whether or not others will receive a reward was actually a lot more prominent in the anterior cingulate gyrus, and the orbitofrontal cortex and the sulcus were much more involved in whether or not you yourself will be receiving a reward. This also serves into the idea of being able to mentalize or interact with other people's thought processes, and to be able to calculate your own reward and other people's rewards based on whatever situation you're in. And here we see two more studies. One which deals with more positive aspects of social emotions and more negative aspects of social emotions. And the positive social side, you have people basically being tested on watching videos where somebody does an act of altruism, or if somebody does acts worthy of admiration, but there's no sort of altruism behind it, they're just doing things that are impressive. And in this experiment, we see that there's more physiological effects of warm chests, relaxation, basically more trustworthiness towards people with that elevation motivation. And then in videos with the admiration motivation, people found more higher energy, they felt more motivated to do impressive things. But yes, we see that in a positive social scenario generally brings out positive emotions, positive physiological benefits. And when we look at the negative social aspects of our biological emotion, we see that the anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved with the distress system, we see that social distress, or in this experiment, social rejection, actually caused more activation in the anterior cingulate cortex. And another experiment where they measured afterwards the activation in anterior cingulate cortex was decreased as activation increased in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. So this area of the brain has to do with more logical thinking, more higher order thinking, and so the anterior cingulate cortex has to do a lot more with distress and emotions, and the medial prefrontal cortex has more to do with being able to think or calculate the environment. And as activation in one goes down, their activation in the other one goes up. So there is really this sort of mind over matter scenario happening biologically, that the more you can take your mind off of something or think logically about it, the less likely you are to feel the extent of the pain being inflicted. And so that was part 2 of the biological basis of emotion, and explaining how emotions facilitate thought, especially when it comes to a social interaction. And then for a third and final part, we will be discussing the parts of the brain involved in understanding emotion and managing of emotion. So thank you.